We'll go File, Save As here, because I should do this anytime I'm making any major changes. Because if I don't, like I said, you could lose a lot of work. This program could freeze, all kinds of bad things can happen. So next thing I want to do is if you notice, when I get my playhead, you can see this looks like a blue car that seems to be driving backwards. Well, it really isn't driving backwards. It's actually, um, you know, it's just moving with the animation. And there's actually a layer called vehicles here, which basically contains those two cars. So what we'll do is we're going to hit the solo switch, which is that button there, so we can isolate it and we can get a better look at what's going on here. And with that vehicles layer, which is really a composition, we're going to see the position value. And what we're going to do is, I don't know, the bee kind of flies through. Actually, we'll just unsolo that for a second so we can see relative to the other positions. So there's the bee flying through. You know what? After the bee flies through, we're going to get these cars to pass. So right around, I guess, maybe 225 or actually, it's not even. It's only, actually, let's take it out to like 1 second. It's, maybe that's just a little too quick. So we'll go at 1 second. And here's what we're going to do now. We're going to create those vehicles flying by. So again, you could solo this just so you can see those vehicles. And again, you can see that the issue is the vehicles appear to be driving backwards, but they really weren't. It's just that they were static in that whole frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those X values, and there's actually two cars. So I'm going to take them, drag them off to the other side of the screen, and I'm going to drop a keyframe. And then I'm going to have these cars go by really fast. So what I'm going to do is move the playhead forward, I don't know, maybe about 8 frames or so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that X value and move it back the other way to have them zip off the side of the screen. So now when I unsolo that layer, so I can see everything in here, I'll see basically, wow, those cars just zipping by, right? And of course, to make it look more realistic, yeah, you guessed it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the motion blur in. Now the problem is because this is a composition, I'm going to have to double click on here, and I'm going to have to actually turn the motion blur on here, and then go back to the master composition, and then the motion blur kicks in. So that's the only thing you got to be careful of. If you can't get the motion blur to work on a composition, so you're actually going to have to open that composition to get those layers active. And I did that by double clicking on it, which basically opened those layers. Now that I've got that on, I don't need that open anymore. And actually, I don't even need Gordon's head open anymore, because it's really, I got what I needed out of it. So that gives you an idea of how that kind of works and creates those cool effects. So, again, I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'm going to update my version. And, you get the idea. I'm saving all the time because I'm making major changes. So that's the traffic. Now, of course, there's other elements in here that are kind of cool that I want to kind of play around with to again add some more visual interest in here. As a matter of fact, there's a bunch of buildings that Gordon passes by here. And what I want to do here now is I want to play around with some of these buildings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, put some animation on those buildings. So again, just kind of punch up what's going on in this little project of mine. And those buildings actually are in a composition called Full Skyline. So again, I'm going to double click on that so I can see those buildings. And now I can see the 3 layers. And this is what I'm going to do basically is I'm going to play around with some of these layers to basically make them do some cool stuff. As a matter of fact, we're going to make them do a little skip and a jump here. So what I want to do is take my playhead where I want those buildings. So basically I'm going to get it in here. There's a really short span in here when these Gordon is kind of passing by these buildings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just as Gordon comes in, which will be around, I don't know, let's just say we'll go to about 5 frames. and I'm going to go to those full skyline buildings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start playing around with some of these things. So I'm going to start with the buildings layer, which is the bottom layer, and hit my p-value. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to basically kind of create the effects. So first I'm going to use whatever these default values are, that building, and I'll drop a keyframe. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go backwards to the beginning. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have that building basically kind of drop below, you know, the visible window area. So that way when it gets to those keyframes, you'll see it jump up, and you know, it'll basically jump up and it goes to that next position. And you can see how that kind of makes for an interesting effect, right? And that is, you know, basically what I want to do. So I want to take these values here, and I want to get all those buildings to do that, but I want to get them to do them one after each other. So now what I'm going to do is take my playhead, and after that first building kind of jumps into place, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on the word position so that both of those keyframes light up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go edit, I'm going to go copy, and then I'm going to click on the buildings layer, and I'm going to go edit, and I'm going to go paste. And what that'll do basically is take those keyframes and paste them on that layer. So there's the first building, right? Now the problem is I don't want them to go right over top of each other. So I'm going to go edit, and I'm going to do undo, because what I want to do is I want to make sure I'm copying them onto the right property of building. So I'm going to hit P for position, and now I'm going to basically click on there, and then I'm going to go edit, and I'm going to go paste. And you see what happened. It just kind of pasted those things. So what I got to do is I've got to kind of shift those values around sometimes, because it will create these problems when you're pasting these keyframes if you don't pay attention to those values. So what it did was it kind of took my Y value as well. So if I basically now just take my values here, and there's already keyframes there, and if I use these buttons here, I can get to those keyframes. So first keyframe, second keyframe, and what I could do now is I could just kind of basically take that X value and move it over, and so now you can see how that kind of played in, right? With that effect. Okay, and again, I can basically just use this, go to my next keyframe, so I can find the keyframes, and then I could make those value changes to those keyframes. So for example, I'm going to go to the Y, and I'm going to basically shorten that up so that it basically kind of lands, you know, where I want it. So you can see, you know, you play around with these keyframes, and because I'm doing this in the nested composition, of course, when I go to back to the master composition, right, that's what you'll see. You'll see those buildings in the background. So again, it gives you an idea of how you can play around with these various elements when you're moving these values around. All right, we'll go File, Save As. Save my version number. I'm now up to number 9, and save.